Podcasts are pretty common. So what makes the Uncommon podcast uncommon? Well, it's all in our name. I'm your host, Noah Weiss, and we at Uncommon Sports Group understand the unique pressures and temptations that come with a career in the sport industry. We provide uncommon training that helps you successfully navigate common challenges. Hit the follow button on this podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Check out our website and become uncommon. What's up, USG fam? Welcome back to the Uncommon Podcast. I'm your host, Noah Weiss, and I'm very excited to welcome Grand Canyon University's Vice President of Athletics, Jamie Boggs, onto the podcast today. Jamie has been in her role as the VP of Athletics since August of 2021 and is the first female to serve in the role at GCU. Prior to her position at Grand Canyon, Jamie spent 6 years at Duke University working in compliance and a little over 3 years at Georgia State University as Senior Associate Athletics Director and Chief Operating Officer. Jamie, thanks so much for hopping on the podcast with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, Jamie, it's a blessing. And, I love your story, Jamie, because you studied psychology at the University of San Diego and then got your law degree from the University of Arizona. It would seem to many outsiders and to myself, just looking at your educational resume, that college athletics was not necessarily where you were trending. How did you eventually end up pursuing a career in college athletics?
I grew up in Phoenix, and when you grow up here, especially at the time that I was here, everyone was a diehard Phoenix Suns fan. So we were all just into the Phoenix Suns and the whole town. And so it's what I kind of grew up doing with my family, watching a lot of sports. And so really my love for sports came from the pro world and being here in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I first started in the industry, I worked in pro sports. I was an intern with Chicago White Sox for a couple of years, for 2 seasons. I was worked with the Orlando Magic, and my first job out of law school was with a sports agency. So I had been in pro sports, but it just didn't have the impact that I was seeking. My heart wasn't into it. And that's when I really started looking at college sports, which at the time I was living on the East. And, in that whole southern region of the country, college sports is huge. And I started to really get into college sports. So I saw an opportunity at Duke University, being a basketball fan. Obviously, I was a Phoenix Suns fan, but I was a basketball fan.
Yeah.
So you knew what Duke University had with Coach K and the legacy he created there. So that's really where I got my start. And since then, just the impact that you're able to influence and the connection you're able to have with student athletes, being able to really, it's just, there's no other industry like it that has collegiate sports. There's nothing in the world.
Yeah.
And so ever since then, I've been a part of it, love it. And it's become more than just about college sports for us. Now that I'm at Grand Canyon University, it really is a passion about sharing GCU's story and our mission.
I love that, Jamie. And one thing that stood out to me in what you said is that you felt like the pro world didn't have the purpose you were seeking, and you gained that experience by actually stepping into positions within the sport industry. And so I love that you tried it out, you felt that it wasn't what you were looking for, and you found another direction that fit better for what you were seeking. And you mentioned Duke University. You spent nearly 6 years at Duke, which really stands out to me. You climbed the ladder from compliance coordinator to assistant athletics director of compliance. So certainly you were doing a tremendous job. But so many young professionals are looking for that next job opportunity. And usually when they think of that next job opportunity, it's jumping from school to school, trying to be the person that climbs the ladder, gets new experiences. But what impact did it have for you to be at one university for such a long period of time and digging up roots there at Duke University?
I see that as well, where you see a lot of kind of people wanting to just look for the next best thing. And I've never been one to do that. I've always been one to, follow God's plan.
Yeah.
And I feel like he kind of moves you when you're ready to move. But I really wanted to make an impact.
Yeah.
It's hard to make an impact when you're only at a place for a year or 2 years. And I think when you think about what impact you can make on the place you work for, the organization, the people, when it's more about than just about your career, you really get more out
Yeah.
of what you do every day. It doesn't become something that, you just do to wake up and do. It comes, as you mentioned before, it becomes a purpose.
Yeah.
And so, I was able to, I think, staying there, getting more and more responsibilities, understanding the bigger picture. Because when you start out as a kind of a coordinator, you're really just working on one thing, compliance. But as you
Yeah.
continue to move up and understand the bigger picture of the organization, that's one thing it really does is you learn to understand the things that matter outside of what you're just doing. So the bigger picture. And I had an opportunity. I remember this one time I was a compliance coordinator. I was just starting out at Duke, and I thought I knew it all because I had this law degree. I know compliance. I studied the book,
Yep.
and I was just focused on compliance. And I remember going through a situation where I made a mistake. I honestly did not do a great job. And I remember Coach K, I'm sure he doesn't remember it, but it was so impactful for me. He pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you understand that anything that happens with the basketball program, it just doesn't affect the basketball program or athletics. This impacts the entire university." And he just gave me that kind of big picture understanding. But it was spending that time there, kind of just growing into the role, having great leaders around me,
Yeah.
really shaped me, and give me appreciation. Honestly, looking back at the people that did invest in me, so makes me want to reinvest back in other people.
Yeah.
But again, you really learn a lot from growing into a role at the same place.
Yeah, I love that part of your story, Jamie. It just really is something you don't see quite as often, even with athletes, right? So often we see them in the transfer portal, and not to judge, each situation is different, but I think there is a ton of value, as we can see in your story, of digging up roots, staying in one place for as long as you feel the Lord has you there, and you making the best of it, right? And obviously, Duke is a high profile athletic department. And I'm sure you learned quite a bit in that during that time there. And I guess a good follow-up, Jamie, is our listeners may be wondering, okay, you started as a compliance coordinator and somehow worked your way up to being the assistant AD of compliance, right? That's quite a big jump. What did you do during your time at Duke to stand out and continue being promoted and climbing the ladder?
A lot of it was building relationships. Compliance, you're not like the fundraiser. You don't go in and say, "Guess what? I just got a big donation for the program." Usually you're going in and saying, "Hey, you need to work on this. You're not doing this right, or you had a violation, or you can do this, but you can't do this." It's never a great conversation because you're compliance. But I really focused on having good relationships with the coaches, student athletes, and just people that were around Duke. And so it was really the relationship building and the kind of trying to be a more positive, compliance person, if there's a such thing. But just building those relationships and networks with people there. And as I started to get more on my plate, I did ask for more responsibility. And I would always ask for more responsibility before I asked for a title change or anything like that. And but it was just growing out the department and growing with people there. I mean, at the time, Duke was also continuing to grow as an athletics department. Everyone knows knows the basketball program, but there were a lot of other programs there that were building and building as well. So growing with them, building the relationships, making sure people know that I cared. I remember one head coach, he called me, he said, Jamie, you're like the administrator of the people. That's what he used to say about me. I took that as the biggest compliment because it told me that he knew that I cared.
Yeah, I love that, Jamie. And I love that you mentioned relationships. I think, man, sports is a place where it can be tempting to be transactional and be thinking about, well, how is this going to benefit me? But sometimes I think we have to, especially as followers of Christ, look outside of ourselves and say, how can I have an impact on the people around me, even if it may not lead to a promotion, right? And so I love that you mentioned that. And then asking for more responsibility. I mean, right, stepping out of the comfort zone. How can I learn? How can I grow? How can I maybe do something I've never done before? And so those are great learning points for our listeners. And doing that right now as young professionals, right, for our listeners is huge, especially, right, when you may not be getting the responsibilities you want. asking for those, I think could be a great way to really build your resume and learn more about this industry. So I love that advice, Jamie, and a great testimony there. And Jamie, your next stop on your journey through college athletics was Georgia State University. And from the outside looking in, right, people might say, well, that's kind of a step down, Jamie, right? You go from Duke to Georgia State. Those are different universities, different institutions. But what was your thought process in moving on from a university as high profile as Duke to a Georgia State that may not have that same high profile title?
So this was another God move for me, because I met my husband when I was at Duke. He was
Mm,
at the time an assistant baseball coach there, and we had gotten married there. And we were about to start a family. I didn't tell anyone at Duke at the time, but I decided that time that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I really wanted to care for my first child.
yeah.
So I actually took a step back from working, and my husband was in agreement and took that step back, with me, and was, supportive of me taking that step back. And
Mm,
I was ready to stay home with my son.
yeah.
And a few months later, I I think after my son was born, I got a call about the opportunity at Georgia State. And that time we
Mm,
had moved to Georgia to be in Dalton, Georgia, where my husband's from.
yeah.
And I think it was one of those things where my husband was like, I want us to
Mm,
move to Atlanta,
yeah.
and get into the city. And I was completely content. I loved being a mom. It's a
Hmm.
blessing.
Yeah.
And, but I felt like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and meet with Georgia State. And,
Mm,
I ended up going there, interviewing with them, and I think I got an offer to work there I think the same day that I interviewed. So
wow.
it was really, something that we had to think about, but I think it was God's will for
Mm,
me to be back in the workforce again. And so I decided to take that opportunity. And then, it was also it was a great opportunity because it was overseeing some areas that I had not overseen before.
mm,
And it was kind of higher in the management role than I had been at Duke. I was on senior staff at Duke, but this was almost that next step
yeah.
up.
Yeah.
So it was, maybe from everyone knows the Duke brand. And at that
Yeah.
time, Georgia State was a growing brand. I think they've done
Hmm.
an incredible job of continuing to grow.
Hmm.
But I've also liked being parts of things that grow.
Yeah.
Um, at Duke, there was not really a built out compliance department. So I had the opportunity to build that. This was also the opportunity to build something that was growing. They were about to go from FCS to FBS, so the highest
Mm,
level of football.
yeah.
And I enjoyed being a part of things that are growing. So it was a great move for me. It was God's plan, and it was, as always, the right thing, the right decision. And I honestly learned so much about management from there. I
Mm,
worked for an athletic director. Her name was Cheryl Levick,
mm,
and she was one of only like two, I think, FBS female athletic directors at the
wow.
time.
Wow.
And she's just really good at administration and at management. And I learned a lot about preparation for
Mm,
her. So, God prepares you for every move.
he
So
does.
it was a great move. I gained a lot out of my time there,
Mm,
and it gave me, that break gave me some time with my son and my family. So
mm.
everything happened the way it was supposed to happen.
I love that perspective, Jamie. I think it's important to remember that even with our careers, the Lord is in control of all of that. And we have to be willing to let go sometimes and trust his plan, his will. And I love that that was top of mind for you, even with being at home with your firstborn and then getting back into the workforce. I think both of those being something that you felt God was leading you to is huge and a great learning point for our listeners. And then you mentioned as well that it was a position you had not been in before and it gave you new opportunities to learn. I guess a follow up question for our listeners as young professionals who are vetting new jobs or will vet new jobs in the future, what are some of the key things to look for in a new job position or job offer that should always be considered when you're looking at those?
Mhm. Well, I think to kind of what you referenced before, sometimes people just look at a name, a
Mm,
brand,
yep.
and that isn't necessarily always the right
Mm,
place, the right fit, the right learning experience for you. You really have to, make sure that it's the right fit, and it's something that really adds value to
mm,
your resume if you want to continue to move up.
yeah.
But fit is without question the most important thing. Sometimes people look at, Power Five versus not Power Five, big name school versus kind of growing school.
Mm.
And the thing is this, I learned more from being at Georgia State and going from a school that was growing than anywhere. And it was because you had to wear a lot of hats,
Yeah.
a little bit of fewer resources. So you had to do a little bit more.
Mm.
When you're at schools that are very well resourced, you kind of get pigeonholed a little bit,
Yeah.
and you can't grow your experience as much as
Mm.
you would. You become more resourceful with money. You just learn so much more of a skill set by being in those roles. So you have to really make sure that the opportunity you take is one that is going to help you grow. And it's also that it's a good fit for you.
Mm.
But I find that when you keep on having, well-resourced school to well-resourced school to well-resourced school, sometimes you just don't get the opportunity to do that much
Mm.
more that will help you grow personally.
Yeah, it's a huge learning point for our listeners. I think for anybody getting into sports, right, there is that temptation to care about what logo is on your polo, right? Of who, how big is the university? Who is it, right? Is it a Notre Dame? Is it a U of M, right? Is it one of these schools that is well renowned? And I think really you should never get into the industry to be in a really awesome position where you're working with a great school or with a great football team. Those things might come, but it's not guaranteed, right? And so it has to come down to what's the reason of why you're getting into it. And then also what you said of when you're in these sometimes smaller institutions that are less resourced, you have more opportunity. And I think that's a great thing to consider for young professionals of, hey, maybe taking the route of going to a school that is less resourced could really benefit you in the long term. So great learning point there. And I love that that's something you mentioned. And Jamie, you joined Grand Canyon's athletic department in 2015 as the deputy athletic director before becoming the vice president of athletics, which is where you are now in 2021. How did you prepare yourself for the responsibilities and leadership that comes with the position as prominent as VP of athletics at a D1 institution?
Yeah, I was really fortunate that the transition was really smooth, and that's because the AD at the time, I thought he was very intentional about letting me run so many of the operations already.
Hmm.
And I really appreciated that about them. He was never, it was never, no, this is my job and this is your job. It was always
Yeah.
very much inclusive. And so that made the transition really smooth. The other thing is, one of the great things about being at Grand Canyon, I mean, these are some of the smartest people I've ever met.
Yeah.
For the university to grow the way this has grown, I was surrounded by people that are not just smart, but they're also very collaborative, very supportive. It's very Christ-centered university. So as I stepped into the role, I was just surrounded by support, and that includes from our president. So I felt prepared because I had so many good people around me,
Yeah.
and I don't want to by any means not mention the team that we already had in place. The staff that's here and that are still here, they were just so good at what they do. Work so hard, so loyal to the university, so committed to student athlete experience, so committed to our mission, that they just made it easy. We're only
Yeah.
great because of the people here.
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of great people here.
That's amazing, Jamie. I love that you pointed out that it really is the people you're with, right, who surround the athletic department. And one thing I thought of as you were sharing is a lot of these things is becoming a leader, right, of a VP of athletics. The things that you have now, the skill sets, right, the talents, the experience, it's caught, not taught, right? Most of the time that's the case. What are some things that young professionals can do in the early part of their career to prepare to be leaders at some point within an athletic department or a team?
Yeah, and just regardless of title, you can be a leader at any time. And I do feel like throughout my career, I was someone that people would turn to, and I think it was because they knew that ultimately my goal was to serve others. It really has to be about others. It
Yeah.
can't be about yourself. And that starts the second you start working. It doesn't start when you become a VP or when you become an athletic director. It starts as soon as you step into that role. And I think I've always held that mentality. I think people have known that, it's always the best interest of the student athletes, the best interest of the department or the university. That was always the priority, and not about what can I do for myself.
Hmm.
But it's just that servant mentality. It's the Christ-centered
Yeah.
mentality that I think you need to start right away.
Yeah.
It's really easy when you're young in a career to try to figure out what can I do next to move up,
Yeah.
but it really should be what can I do to serve you.
Hmm. Yeah. Could not agree more, Jamie. I think that's right on point, right? Of we have to be focusing on the main thing, right? The foundation of our lives should be the foundation of how we approach our work. And that's having a foundation in Christ, but allowing that to make you a servant, right? Not expecting people to serve you or for someone that you're building a relationship with to actually get you a job, right? That may happen, and that does happen oftentimes, but the focus should be on other people. So I love that response. And, just as our young people are in these positions, right? You can be a leader even as an intern, right? Even as, whatever you're doing. I remember I was working as an intern with the Indianapolis Colts, and I was in charge of 25 volunteers who came during each day of practice to help out with training camp. And that was a chance for me to be a leader. So I think in any position, right, even as an intern, you can have a chance to lead and practice for the opportunities that you have now of being a leader down the line. So that's great. And Jamie, Grand Canyon has a very unique athletics journey, going from an NAIA until the early 1990s to competing at the D1 level since 2017. What has been unique about your role at GCU compared to your previous roles at Duke and Georgia State?
Oh, very, very unique for sure. GCU is a unique place. It was not that long ago. It was in the early, mid 2000s that we only had 900 students on campus, and we were on the verge of closing as a university. $20 million in debt.
Mm,
And that's when our current president, Brian Mueller, came in. He brought his team. They really invested in this university, invested into technology, into campus, into people,
yeah.
to help grow this university from 900 students to where we are today, which is at about 26,000 students on campus.
Wow.
And so we are the largest Christian university in the country.
Mm,
From an athletic standpoint, we want to grow just as fast as the rest of the university. I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
but I tell our staff, our team, gosh, what the university did from a growth standpoint is kind of the equivalent of us like going to the Final Four in like
Yeah.
5 years. so,
Yeah.
so we're behind. So there's a couple of things. One is just kind of the kind of aggressive growth that the university has experienced in a very positive way. I mean,
Mm,
what the university does is so needed for higher education industry. And so we came in and said, we need to align with the campus. We
mm,
need to have the same blueprint, the same culture, the same mission
mm,
as campus. And so that was one. But just the aggressiveness of being competitive. And we've done a fairly good job. We've won
yeah.
58 championships since we've
Wow.
been Division I, and a lot of
Wow.
people say that's a lot. That's a lot of success, but not compared to what the university has done over the
Mm,
last 10 years.
yeah.
The second part is kind of just the why.
Mm,
The why has changed, and that's because of our mission here at Grand Canyon University. Our mission is, we really transform the lives of students that come here,
mm,
and this better than anyone. But
yeah.
when you are really understanding God and Christ's sacrifice for us, it's transformational,
Mm,
and it's the fabric. His mission, the Christian mission, is the fabric of who we are at
mm,
this university, and so rather than just being competitive, there's a why behind why
yeah.
we want to win. We are able to use the platform of athletics to tell the story of Grand Canyon University and share the mission of this university.
Mm,
And so our why is more. It's more than just winning games. It's
yeah.
sharing the story of this amazing place that is transformational to the lives of so many students and so many families.
That's awesome to hear, Jamie. And you talked about impact earlier in the episode, and I think that comes full circle now that you're at Grand Canyon in your home city, right, with a Christ-centered mission. That's really cool to hear in terms of your story. And, for our listeners, right, sometimes winning is great, and winning can bring a lot of joy. And obviously, I'm sure you root for every GCU athletics team to win, but even if they don't, right, when you have a greater purpose, the job still matters, right? What you're doing still matters, and you can look past those losses or even those wins, right, and see the bigger reason as to why you're going to work every day. So I love that part of what GCU is all about. And you mentioned, obviously, GCU has a very strong Christian foundation, and that's unique to the other two universities you were at. So just share with us, what has been the biggest difference about working at GCU as a Christ follower as compared to the previous roles that you had?
I think Grand Canyon University is different than any probably university in probably the country.
No doubt.
Maybe there's a couple that are similar to us, but um, you know, we are very collaborative. We are all rowing in the same direction,
Mm-hmm.
and that direction is Christ.
Mm.
We are Christ centered,
Yeah,
and you can see it the second you walk onto campus. You've been to our campus, you kind of
it's
have a feel
amazing.
for it, but everyone understands. And decisions that are made, business decisions, um, decisions about everything that we do
Mm.
goes back to, are we centered on our students, and are we centered on Christ?
Mm.
There's not a lot of fighting,
Yeah,
battling
yeah,
on campus. And for an organization, any large organization, and universities are large organizations,
yeah,
that's really rare.
yeah.
Um, but everyone here knows our why.
Mm.
Uh, the vision of President Mueller, his Christ-centered mission, the mission of this university, it's understood the second you walk on campus.
Yeah.
And if you're kind of not understanding when you first get hired, you understand immediately.
Mm.
And so just the fact that you have a campus of 26,000 students, of 7,000 employees, and everyone gets it.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
for any large organization,
It's
that's really
amazing.
rare. And so it's truly been it's been transformational for me to be here. It's
Mm.
and I think our teams, our coaches, our student athletes will say the same thing. But it really is a unique place, and it's one that I'm very proud to be a part of.
Mm. It really just shows what the Lord is doing right through athletics at GCU, and just so encouraged that there is that Christ-centered foundation. And really, that's not the case at every university, right? That can be something that young people are challenged with as believers. Is, well, how can I live out my faith, but I'm not at a Christian school? And you've had experience with that, right? Of being a believer at a non-Christian institution. So what were some of the ways you lived out your faith in your previous roles, despite the fact that those schools weren't exactly as Christ-centered as GCU is?
Yeah, and your point is good, and it's almost hard for believers to be and act out their faith
Yeah,
at other institutions, and
no
it's
doubt.
sad, and it's why it's become so important for GCU to really share our story.
Hmm.
But I think ultimately we can share our faith and act out our faith in every
Mm.
interaction we have with people,
Yeah.
with others, in everything we do.
Mm.
Even in example, in a management role, we're a performance-based industry. You have to produce results. You have to
Yeah.
think about, you get to know your coaches, and you don't ever want to fire anyone, but if someone has a losing record over 3 years,
Yeah.
you have to make some changes, but you can do it with empathy.
Mm.
You can do it knowing that you have a relationship with the people that you work with, that you care about them, and that you're going to ultimately be there for them, and find a way to serve them in another capacity, whether it's helping them find another opportunity, which I've done, and just making sure they know that you care. It's in your
Mm.
actions. It's in
Yeah.
your heart. It's showing um, it's it's showing God's way through your hands, your feet, your actions, and your
Mm.
words.
Without a
So
doubt.
you might not be able to be outwardly expressive about faith, but you can with your actions. And I think
Mm.
that's probably even just as powerful, right?
Yeah.
To be like Christ in it as much as you can. We never will be, but to be as much as you can, and kind of show that in your actions to others.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more, Jamie. And I think the actions are really what make us Christian, right? Obviously, we do stand on a foundation of beliefs, and that's what drives a lot of our actions. But as you were talking, I thought of the story of Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan, right? And a Pharisee asked Jesus, "What does it mean to love your neighbor? Who is my neighbor?" And Jesus gives this story of a man who was robbed and beaten and left on the side of the road. And there's three people that come down the path. The first two ignore the man in need, and the last, who was the Samaritan, helps him, right? Gives him a place to stay, cleans up his wounds, helps him kind of get back on his feet. And Jesus says that's the man that loved the neighbor. So it was the actions, right? It wasn't just the beliefs, which obviously are important too, but it's those actions that really speak to who Christ is to those around us. So great example, and couldn't agree more, right? If you're in one of these institutions that doesn't allow you to speak up on some things, live it out. And I think that'll speak louder at the end of the day. So well said, Jamie. And Jamie, I learned 2 fun facts about you in my research for this podcast.
Okay.
And the first is that you're the first female athletic director at Grand Canyon, which is incredible. It's an awesome fact. And the second is that you were one of 4 Asian American athletic directors at the Division I level. What challenges have you faced as a woman and a minority working in college athletics?
I've been very fortunate. I was very fortunate to grow up in a household and be surrounded in an environment where there was not my race or my gender was never an obstacle. It was never seen as one. My family, my parents always challenged me. It was never you need to be the hardest working. You need to be the hardest working female. It's always you need to be the hardest working person. You need to. And it was always you need to figure out a way how to help others. It was never an obstacle. So, being in an industry that's primarily dominated by males, I honestly never focused on it. Did I go through some challenges? Maybe. I mean, there were some people that question your knowledge of sports. I remember telling someone that, I passion in sports. That's why I want to work in the sports industry. And his first tendency was, he said, well, a lot of women say they like sports, but they don't really like sports. They don't really know sports. And he started to question me on my knowledge of sports. He said, well, what college did Jason Kidd go to? And I said, Cal,
or, you know what you're talking about, right?
1993 finals, Phoenix Suns versus Bulls. Who had the winning shot game 6 for the Bulls? And I was like, well, first of all, if you grew up in Phoenix, you still remember that game because it still hurts us a lot. So I said it's John Paxson. So I had to prove myself. But I didn't ever take that personally. I didn't find it offensive. I think people, regardless of race or whatever, people face challenges, and we're going to face challenges. And so I always saw challenges as opportunities, ways to learn, ways to grow. And for any one person that maybe was challenging because of my race or gender, there was another person that was supportive no matter what. And I chose to focus on the supportive person. So I think, going through the industry, just having honestly just an attitude of gratitude for being in the position that I was in. And, I think people would love to face the challenges that I faced just to be in the position that I was in or have been in. So I think just those things, not making excuses, always focusing on the positive. Those are the things that kind of help me grow into this career. And so everyone has challenges. We just have to make sure that we figure out how to make those challenges opportunities.
And obviously that mindset has worked out very well for you. So I love that. And, certainly that's great advice, because regardless, right? I mean, obviously there are challenges that come with every circumstance and every individual's journey. But you have to focus on those positive things that are in your life, in your career, and allow those to be what propels you forward. And I even love what you said too, of you surrounded yourself with those who were supportive. And I think at times, right, you may have people that are not quite as supportive of what you're doing or your work, but you'll always have people that are in your corner. So keeping a good circle around you, having good community is going to be a catalyst to you really enjoying your career, right? But also having success in that. So great advice. And it is really...
Well, I do have one piece of advice though for I think it's both for women and men. The challenges of being a woman I never thought about. What is challenging is being a working mom, regardless of your industry. And what I hear a lot of is, I don't know if complaining is the right word, but kind of just maybe it is complaining, but some complaining that, hey, it's hard for working moms, we have to do X, Y, and Z. And I've always said this, being a mom is the biggest blessing God has given us. We are the only ones that can be moms. And so as challenging, as time consuming, as hard, as stressful as it may be to be a working mom, we have to always remember that the blessing of being a mom is probably the biggest blessing that we could have. So I just encourage not just women, but even, the fathers out there, just parents that are working to to just always keep in mind how much of a blessing it is to be able to have a family, and to work at the same time. It's hard,
Yeah.
but they're blessings.
Huge blessing. Huge blessing. Families are one of the institutions God has made, right? Without us really choosing that. I always think about, and just a small thing of the family you're born into, you don't choose that, right? And so that those are your people God has given you, right? Sometimes for better or for worse, but it is a blessing nonetheless. And it's a great transition, Jamie. My next question was, you have a lot of responsibility at work, right? You are the vice president of athletics at a D1 institution that is thriving, but you're also a wife and a mother of 2 children. How do you find a healthy work-life balance? I feel like from an outsider's perspective and a young man that doesn't have any kids, that would be very challenging. So how do you find that good work-life balance?
I'm going to be honest with all your listeners, and that there
Yeah.
isn't truly a balance.
Mm.
You have to make decisions every day on what to prioritize,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be intentional about quality time on both the work side and with your family. And typically the sacrifice that's made is typically the family.
Yeah.
So having a supportive spouse,
Yeah.
that really is willing to just be your partner truly in your work.
Mm.
My husband's an 82, right? We're the 80s together.
That's awesome.
So, but having that understanding, and this is where I also go back to fit. Being at a Christian university, it is very family oriented here. The understanding of how important the family unit is, it's just understood here at Grand Canyon University, and so and that doesn't happen everywhere. But if it is a priority, and it should be a priority to have, I wouldn't say balance, but be able to prioritize when needed, then it's really critical to find a place that really values families as much as you do.
Yeah, without a doubt, Jamie. And I had a leader in my life once say, he was a basketball coach at the D1 level, that when you take on a career in sports, it's not a balance, it's a lifestyle. And you have to have a good team around you, that, right? A family team, a friends team that comes around you in that. And I remember too, people that I trusted and that were good leaders in my life during sports that had families, they would bring them around their work. And I think that's another way that I think you would agree with, where if you include them in what you do, it's going to be a lot easier and more enjoyable for everyone. So it's a great point. And I give you a ton of kudos for doing what you do and balancing that. And I'm sure it's tough at times, but I'm also sure that you do a great job at it. So I appreciate the work that you do.
Got a lot of support around here, so.
No doubt. That's a good thing to have, Jamie. It's a great thing to have. And my last question, Jamie, is, all of our listeners aspire to be successful in this industry. So what advice would you have for them as they continue pursuing careers in both college athletics or just athletics in general?
I go back to the same thing that I say, and it has to be about serving others. People say networking and networking. And yes, knowing people is important, but relationships are much more important than networking, and they're not the same thing. And you build relationships by being genuinely and authentically willing to serve others. And it's for any industry. And I think when you do that, people want to help you too. So as people, your colleagues, your peers, you guys move up together. Athletics is such a small industry, and you move up together. And then when you find that you have that core of people who are your people, you rise together. And then when you rise together, you remember to continue to serve those around you, serve those that work for you, and of course serve those above you. So it's just that constant mentality of service that really is critical in any industry, but especially as small as the athletics industry is.
No doubt, Jamie. I always think of the word Jesus, or this verse from Jesus when he says, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. So if the highest being in all creation, right, the Son of the living God, can serve, then we most definitely should be serving as well as his followers. So great advice, Jamie. And thank you so much for your time. Certainly a lot of our listeners look up to you as someone that's a leader in this industry. You certainly are. And we pray that you'll continue to be that in your role at Grand Canyon.
Thank you. Appreciate this. Enjoyed the time, enjoyed connecting with you, and really appreciate the work that you are doing in the industry.
If you want to get involved with Uncommon Sports Group and the mission that we are on to help you navigate the sport industry as followers of Christ, apply for our academy on our website at uncommonSG.org. That's uncommonSG.org. Be sure to catch new episodes of the Uncommon Podcast every other week on Thursdays at midnight Eastern Time. Until next time, we pray that you will strive to be uncommon by glorifying the name of God in whatever you may do. See you next time.